My father-in-law, Leonard Carter, had been growing suspicious of me for a while. My 3-year-old son, Noah, didn't look anything like my husband, Eric, and that seemed to bother Leonard to no end. One day, Leonard decided to act on his suspicions. Without telling me, he secretly took Noah for a DNA test. The results came back. No blood relationship between them. Furious and humiliated, Leonard flew into a rage. "You shameless woman," he screamed, threatening to choke me and my son. Eric, feeding off his father's anger, slapped me and yelled, "How could you make me raise another man's child for 3 years?" I calmly reached into my bag and pulled out another DNA report, placing it in Leonard's hand. "Before you get too carried away," I said with a small laugh, "you might want to read this." Both Leonard and Eric stared at the report in stunned silence. The document revealed that Leonard and Eric were not biologically related either. The tension in the room hung heavy as I smirked and said, "Looks like it's not so clear who's really not related in this family." When I got Mr. Carter's call, I was working late at Hamilton Company Enterprises, drowning in deadlines. His voice came through nearly a shout. "Jocelyn Carter, you shameless woman, get home right now. Don't blame me when your dirty deeds go public." Before I could respond, he hung up, leaving me baffled. I finished my work, grabbed my bag, and hurried home. The moment I opened the door, there he was, seated rigidly on the couch. 2 sheets of paper with tightly packed text play on the table in front of him. I slipped off my shoes and asked Dad, "What's so urgent?" He smeared and stared at me bitterly. "You really don't know what you've done? Do I need to spell it out?" Frustration began to build. "No idea what you're talking about. Just say it." In the next instant, he slammed those papers into my face. "Take a look for yourself. We really hit rock bottom when Eric married you." I looked down to see the words printed in bold on the report. No biological relationship. The names on the report were Leonard Carter and Noah Carter. I was stunned, only now realizing Mr. Carter had taken Noah to get a paternity test done. Finger surged, and I retorted, "Dad, ever since Noah was born, you've been saying he doesn't look like Eric." I didn't think much of it, since Eric never complained. But going behind our backs and taking him to do a DNA test? Mr. Carter ignored me, shouting, "And what's wrong with that? If I hadn't done it, who knows how much longer you'd have kept us all in the dark. Tell me, who's his father? You've had us raising someone else's kid for 3 years. My son's too trusting. If I weren't sharp, you'd have fooled us forever." Trying to stay calm, I explained, "Dad, Noah is Eric's son, and he's your grandson. I haven't done anything to betray him. There must be something wrong with that report." Seeing my denial, Mr. Carter became enraged. He flung his cup onto the floor, pointing at me with a shaking finger. "You're still lying." I personally took him to St. Vincent's Medical Center and watched them draw his blood. "What? You think I faked it?" "We can go again if you don't believe me." I said nothing, trying to wrap my mind around how Noah could lack any biological link to Mr. Carter. Just then, Mrs. Helen Carter entered carrying groceries. Noticing the tense atmosphere, she asked, "What's going on here?" "I just stepped out to shop, and now it's chaos in here." "What are you two arguing about?" Mr. Carter shot back. "You handpicked her for Eric." "Look what she's done, letting us raise someone else's kid for 3 years. Where were your eyes back then?" Mrs. Carter froze, her gaze falling on the report on the floor. I saw a flicker of panic cross her face, but before I could react, she slapped me. "Noah isn't our grandson. How could you do this? Our Eric's been nothing but good to you. How could you betray us like this?" Mr. Carter joined in. "Call your parents. I want to know what kind of people raised such a daughter. How dare you do something so disgraceful?" I fought to stay composed. "I'm telling you for the last time, Noah is Eric's son. If you don't believe me, wait until Eric comes home. He can take another DNA test with Noah and we'll put this nonsense to rest." Mr. Carter glared but said nothing, while Mrs. Carter shouted, "You're acting shamelessly, still insisting on your innocence. Even if Eric comes back, he won't forgive you. Why another test when the answer is clear? If Noah were Eric's son, he'd have to be related to Mr. Carter." "What? You think the hospital is helping you lie to us?" Just as I was about to argue back, Noah wandered out of his room. "Grandpa, Grandma, Mom, why are you fighting? Is dinner ready?" Seeing him, Mr. Carter snapped, "Who are you calling Grandpa and Grandma? We don't know whose kids you even are. Get out." Noah, bewildered by his grandparents' sudden change, ran to me in tears. His crying only irritated Mr. Carter more. He yanked Noah away from me and gripped his shoulders. "What are you crying for? You're not welcome here. Go find your real dad. Get out of our house." Mrs. Carter stood frozen, saying nothing. Seeing Noah's face turn red, I pried Mr. Carter's hand off him and held him close. My own tears began to fall. Let's wait for Eric to come home. He'll know whether Noah is his son. Finally, Mr. Carter released him, shot me a disdainful look, and stomped back to his room. I took Noah to our bedroom and quickly texted Eric about everything that had happened. His reply was just 4 cold words, "I'm on my way." That terse message gave me a bad feeling. Eric got home around midnight. Hearing the front door, I covered Noah and left the room to meet him. Seeing him only brought out all my pent-up frustration. "Do you know what your dad did to Noah today?" He nearly choked him. "Are you even going to say something? Can you give it a rest?" "I just got home. Let me breathe, will you?" One look at his detached expression and my heart sank. The DNA report lay on the table, but he didn't seem the least bit interested in looking at it. He was ready to accept it at face value. By now, both Mr. and Mrs. Carter had joined us. Mrs. Carter spoke first. "Eric, thank God you're back. If you'd been any later, our family would have fallen apart. Ask her whose child she brought into this house." Mr. Carter stood there with a furious expression, saying nothing. Finally, Eric broke the silence. "Where's the child?" He called Noah the child, not by his name. That stung because I realized he didn't believe Noah was his son. I took a studying breath. "Eric, we've been married 4 years and known each other for 6. Don't you know what kind of person I am?" "If you won't believe me, at least believe in Noah," Eric replied. "For years doesn't mean anything. Besides, Noah has never looked like me. Everyone's been saying it. What else am I supposed to think?" I was speechless, realizing I had no way of reasoning with these people. "Fine. If none of you believe that Noah is your son, let's go to the hospital and do another DNA test right now. I'll get Noah just as I turned to head toward our room." Eric grabbed my arm. "Enough. You really want to drag this to the hospital? You aren't ashamed of this mess?" I couldn't help but laugh. Why would I be ashamed? My conscience is clear. If you're so sure of yourselves, let's confirm it with another test. In the silence of the night, my words rang with a finality I hadn't felt before. Eric looked ready to argue, but Mrs. Carter cut him off. "Why go to the hospital? We already have a report right here. Is Jocelyn claiming her own husband and father-in-law are framing her? That's rich. How long have you been setting us up, Jocelyn?" Her accusation, so illogical and spiteful, was a shock. I'd never seen Mrs. Carter so cold and cruel. Realizing that nothing I said would change a thing, I clenched my fists. After a long silence, Eric finally picked up the DNA report, barely glancing at it before tossing it at me. "It's all here in black and white. Noah isn't Dad's blood relative. If he's my son, he'd have to be. Anything to add? Or are you saying the hospital faked this?" I bit my lip. I don't know what went wrong with this report, but there's definitely something. "If you believe me at all, let's do another test with Noah and we'll settle this." Eric let out a bitter laugh. "And why would I trust you over my own father?" Those words left me frozen. I knew he wouldn't believe me, but hearing it hurt more than I thought it would. "So what now?" I asked, my voice raw. "Are you planning to throw us out of this house?" At that, Mr. Carter exploded, standing up from his chair. "So you admit it? I knew Eric shouldn't have married you in the first place, raising another man's kid for 3 years. What are you going to do to pay us back?" Mrs. Carter chimed in. "Exactly. I treated you and Noah like family, only to find out I was being lied to. Do you have any shame? I couldn't hold back anymore. When did I admit to anything? You're all just making accusations without proof. What do you want from me, Mac?" Eric's hand met my face in a sharp slap. He glared at me. "I'm giving you one last chance to tell the truth. Who is Noah's father? If you stay silent, I'll make sure the whole town hears what you've done." I rubbed my stinging cheek, my voice full of defiance. "Go ahead and tell them. I have nothing to hide." Eric grabbed my collar, his voice full of venom. "You think you can make a fool out of me? How long has this been going on? I should have known better than to marry a woman like you. I close my eyes. Fine. Let's get a divorce. I'll take Noah, since none of you care about him anyway. The idea of divorce seemed to set Eric off completely. Oh, you'd love that, wouldn't you? Take your bastard child and leave. Get out. I don't want to see either of you again. I should have smothered him at birth. In all the years I'd known him, I'd never heard Eric say anything so cruel. Before I could respond, Mrs. Carter stormed into our bedroom and began throwing my things out into the hallway, the noise waking up Noah. He stumbled out of his room and, spotting Eric, ran toward him. Daddy, you're back. I missed you. Before he could finish, Eric roughly pushed him away. Noah hit the edge of the table with a sickening thud, a streak of blood appearing on his forehead.